Okay, I'll start screen sharing now, so we can start with the lesson. Let's see, yes. Start with Wikipedia. Because Wikipedia is not the big bad wolf that many teachers want to paint it as. There's lots of interesting information there, actually. So I wanted to go here to Wikipedia to check what vector graphics actually are. So I think, so we did pixel graphics. Oh, by the way, somebody has got the mic on. We can hear some sort of noises there. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I was talking on Monday a lot about the pixel resolution and how it's important in pixel images, and it is important. But when you have vector images, that problem doesn't exist that much. So here it says that vector graphics are computer graphics images that are defined in terms of points on a Cartesian plane. So they are connected by lines and curves to form polygons and other shapes. So no matter how much you magnify a vector, it will always stay sharp. And that's why they are so good for logos, for instance, or any kind of graphics actually that you need to blow up in big sizes or small sizes. Well, many illustrations are made with vector graphics, and sometimes even animations are made with them. Okay, then there's a lot of talk about where it's used. Of course, you can change a vector graphics image into a pixel image, and that's what you do when you do exporting from something like Adobe Illustrator or Affinity Designer. So when you export a vector image into JPEG, then it becomes a pixel image, basically. But doing it the other way around is, well, not that simple. I mean, changing vector pixel images to vector images. There are a couple of ways to do that. One of them is tracing by hand, basically. The other one is by letting the computer guess where things go. Adobe Illustrator is pretty good at this, I think. Affinity Designer is, well, I would not yet recommend it for that purpose, for tracing pixel images into vectors. Okay, there is a lot of stuff, maths. Yes, I wanted to go also to Bezier Curves, because that's something that we are going to try out. And Bezier Curves are something that are maybe the trickiest for a beginner in vector graphics. You don't need to understand all the maths here, although it's of course nice if you do. or if you're interested, then of course you might want to read this stuff. What I'm interested in Bezier curves is how they actually behave. Basically, well, here are some animated Bezier curves. Here's where you see the what's called, for instance, an anchor point, and then there are these handles around it that define the curve, basically. So you can see how the handles define the curve. And usually one curve is handled by two of these anchor points. Okay, so maybe I'll put a link to these Wikipedia pages into the Moodle page, just for further reading if you're interested. But let's go to Affinity Designer and see what this is in practice. Yeah, well, maybe I should first tell you what I have in mind for today. So we're going to go see how these polygons work there, and also how to do straight lines, and how to do these Bezier curves. And then see how to do fills and lines and different kinds of fills, and how to import pixel images into Affinity Designer. Actually, Affinity Designer is a hybrid software where you can do quite nicely also pixel graphics, just like Affinity Photo handles vectors also. But we'll be mostly in the vector side today, mostly. Then I have a couple of datas for you. I'll do one of them here in the lesson as an example, and then you can make your own versions. And there is some, or actually a lot of creativity involved in at least two of these tasks. So I have 3 tasks for you for today. One of them is a little bit more boring than the others, but I hope it will make you more familiar with the Bezier curve tools and the pen tool in general. Generally, the Affinity Designer behaves a lot like Adobe Illustrator. There are some points where it differs, but I'll tell you where it goes differently. There's also well, software called Inkscape, and I should maybe also put some link to it here. Let's see, Inkscape is totally free, Inkscape, and they just had their first official version release like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. The thing is that Inkscape has been around for quite a long time, like almost 10 years, but it's only now that they have their first version. Well, it's an open program. And well, you can get it for a Windows PC and a Mac, and I think also for Linux. It does basically the same things than Affinity Designer or Adobe Illustrator. Personally, I don't like the UI, the user interface so much with Inkscape than I like it with Affinity Designer or Illustrator. But yes, it can do a couple of things that Affinity can't do. So it's worth trying out, seeing if you like it or not, I think. Okay, and yeah, it doesn't cost anything. That's also a plus. But let's go into Designer. And start a new document. Oh yes, I wanted to also show you very quickly how text behaves in Affinity Designer and what you can do with it. Anyway, so the new document window is quite similar to Affinity Photo. We have the devices, we have the different web sizes, and there's print. Okay, so I think I'll take this A5.
I can see only the ink space.
Oh, of course, because I forgot to share the thing. Right, thanks for reminding me. Okay, I'll change to Affinity Designer. Or best, even best, I'll take the desktop, then you should see everything I'm doing. Yes, now it's the right screen. Okay, so what I'm going to choose here is, like I said, the a portrait A5, and if I change the units into pixels, you can see that the width is 1748 pixels times 2480 pixels. And yes, there is a DPI number, but it's not that important right now. But if we export stuff, then it is nice to have a high DPI number. Anyway, color format. So if this was really just a print document, then I would certainly put the CMYK colors there. But as it's not necessarily, I'll stick with RGB. Let's keep it with the RGB 8 this time. And yeah, I think I'll make a transparent background. What I could also do is create an artboard, because artboards are a really interesting invention. It's basically like having maybe like having a desk, a work desk, and then you have several pieces of paper there, and for each one you can do different stuff. It's also handy if you need to have like the same graphics for several different purposes. Okay, and you need to look at them side by side and not on layers. Okay, I won't put any bleeding settings or margins here. because we'll do layouts later on. No, I'm just interested in the graphics. Okay, create. Okay, and it seems that I forgot to make the document horizontal, but doesn't matter. I can change the setting of the artboard. I'll just go on the corner and I'm pressing the shift key so that it does it in the well, in 45 degrees increments. Okay, so this is our artboard. And as you can see, it's also transparent. And there's an artboard tool extra here that where I can create another artboard. It's just then that while exporting, I have to see that I have selected the right artboards. So I could now easily create a new artboard right here, maybe a smaller one, maybe a bigger one. So, or I could create an artboard here that is in some predefined size. Anyway, what I also have here is a layers panel, and now you can see both artboards here. I think I'll make the second artboard invisible for a while, or at least so that I won't be working there right now, but here. Okay, so what we did in Affinity Photo, we used the rectangle tool and other like these basic tools, and that's totally possible here as well. So when I have created this rectangle, it has by default a fill and a stroke. And there are several ways of getting to this fill and stroke. Like for instance, here. There are several panels here. There's the color panel, and there's the swatches panel. Also there's a stroke panel and appearance panel. And we can get to the fill and stroke also up here. And in these ways, Affinity Designer is a lot like Adobe Illustrator. You can find the same things in there as well, which, by the way, makes it also easy to switch from using Illustrator to using Designer. At least I think so. Anyway, now there's a white fill and a black outline. How can I change them? Or a stroke, actually. So the easiest way would be just to click here on some, let's change it to RGB, by the way. I'll click on some color, and then I can change the fill. So if I go back to these HSL colors, then, well, actually I like this because it's an easy way to defining how much black or how much white there is in the color. Okay, there's something that would be called in Finnish marjapuuro, like berry porridge. If I like this particular berry porridge color, I could save it here in the swatches panel. Here's this weird looking add current fill to palette symbol. And there it is. You can see that I have already saved a couple of fills here. Another way of changing the fill is by clicking from here, then you get to the color wheel. If you like that better, then that's also okay. Okay. And there's also the possibility of gradients, where we'll go pretty soon. Anyway, then to strokes. So right now there's a really thin black stroke. Oh, there's no stroke, I think. So I can change here by clicking the stroke in the foreground, that so that I can actually see it. I can also use the Command X to change the background color and the foreground color. So I'm clicking on X, and this is the same command that we have in both Photoshop and Illustrator, and I think it's also in Adobe After Effects. Anyway, so now I can, there is actually a stroke, but it's 0 points. So I can, in the strokes panel, make it bigger or change it from here. And now that it's big, maybe I can also show other things about the stroke. For instance, I can also change how the corners are. Right now they are these rounded outer corners, and so this is how it goes. Or I could align the stroke so that it's inside the object or outside the object, or now, right now it's in the middle of the object. Most people like to work so that it's in that the stroke is in the middle of the object, but well, okay. Then I can also change the stroke into a dashed line, and I can also change here how the dash looks like. If I put this into 2, and this happens. 1, and so on. So here you can change the dash if you're into that. Anyway, I go back to the straight line. And at any point, I can change the color of that stroke. Yep. Okay. It's interesting. By the way, I have 2 monitors here, or 2 computers, where I can see both images, of course, and the Windows PC is showing me slightly different colors than this MacBook that I have. It also depends if you have a real desktop computer, not a laptop, then you can calibrate your screen so that it shows the colors as well as possible. but with, well, laptops it's not that common to be able to calibrate a screen. Back in the 90s, because I'm old, I remember the 90s. Back in the 90s, the Mac screens used to be the only ones that could be calibrated at all. And that's why graphic designers and other media people started using mostly Macs for graphic stuff. Then in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, Windows PCs took a step forward with how the monitors showed colors. And right now there's no, well, there is a difference. I think there is a wider range for, well, for Windows PCs, I think, but the Macs are trying to be there. Another reason why graphic designers used to use Macs in the 90s and after that was the fonts. There's a particular font called Helvetica. You may have heard of it. You may also have seen a font called Arial. So Helvetica is a very widely used font. Some say that it's the world's most popular font, the font of the world, the Western world at least. And Apple bought the rights for using the original Helvetica back in the I think it was the early 1980s. You can check that somewhere when it was, if that interests you. But anyway, even to this day, you can't use the original Helvetica on a Windows PC. So what Windows does have is Arial, which is kind of a weak copy of Helvetica. So if you care about typography, you don't use Arial instead of Helvetica. But yeah, that's one of the historical reasons why many graphic designers like to use Macs. Anyway. Okay. I think I've shown what I wanted with this one. So let's go to the pen tool, which behaves quite similarly both here and anywhere else. It's the pen tool is made for, well, lines and curves, and doing the straight lines is really easy with the pen tool. Ticks, ticks, ticks. I don't know why I do the sound effect, but it felt right. If I want to leave this open and start a new line, then I press ESC on my laptop, and there we have it. By the way, I'll make the stroke a little bit finer. Okay, so nothing really exciting there, except that if you want to get to the anchor points, you'll have to use the node tool, where the or you press A on your keyboard. This is the move tool is V on your keyboard, and the node tool is A on your keyboard, and those are the same that are in Adobe Illustrator, and it is very good to learn these two, A and V, because you'll be using both when you do vector graphics. So okay, if I want to have any of these anchor points and move them, then I'll use the node tool. Also, I can use it so that I make a selection like this, and this way I can select both of these or a bunch of them, of anchor points or nodes. Okay, there's also the point transfer tool under it. Okay, so like I said, doing these straight lines is really easy, but where it's a little bit difficult, not too much difficult, is when you want to do Bezier curves. So with Bezier curves, you have to hold your mouse button or hold your, well, I'm actually not using a mouse, I'm using the, what's this called? This, anyway, I'll hold the left mouse button down when I want to make a curvy line. Oh, by the way, now this was active, so that's why it wanted to continue the curve there. But so now I have to click on the command, or on a PC it would be a control, and I'll get to this node tool quickly by doing that. If I'm in another tool, that's like a shortcut. Click command or control, and then you're back. Okay, anyway, now I'm clicking and holding, and I'm drawing out the handles for the Bezier curve. And now I'll continue, and I'll click and hold and make the curve. And I can already see that there is a curve. And I could either close this shape by clicking here back on the origin, or I could close it just, well, I'll show you soon how to close open lines in different ways. Okay, so now it's a closed shape. There are some benefits with closed shapes. Anyway, if I wanted to close this shape here, for instance, I would have to select both of the end nodes and then take action by clicking here, close curve. In Illustrator, it's the command join, or you click control and join, or control and G, actually, J, yes, not G, J, yeah. J like join. But here it's an action. Anyway, what if I want to change some of these nodes, some of these anchor points into, well, Bezier curves? Well, there are these convert buttons here. And there was also the point transform tool over here. So there are a couple of ways of doing that. So let's try the smooth conversion first. So as you can see, now it's a curve. And of course, it goes also the other way around, that you can convert something to a sharp point if you want to. There we go. So what if you notice that you have either too many points, anchor points here, or too few? Well, you can always go with the node tool and click here on your curve and create new points. This is, by the way, easier than in how you do it in Adobe Illustrator. It's a little bit old-fashioned there, but not much different. But I think this is more, well, easier to learn how it actually works. There we go. So what if I don't like this point, then I just click backspace and it's gone. Poof. Because sometimes, especially if you use something like the pencil tool, which is basically where you can draw free lines, sometimes there are too many points. Well, now it did a very nice job, it seems. Let's see if I don't have any stabilizer. Okay, so now it did create a couple of points that I don't want to have there necessarily. Like here, it's no use having 2 points here so close to each other, so I could now take some of them away if I wanted. The more anchor points you have, the bigger your vector file will be. So if you have like thousands and 10,000s of points, then there will be some, or there might be some problems in handling the file. Okay. So I'm going to create, with a pencil tool, I think I'm going to create some really simple shape, and then we can see what other things we can do with it. Okay, so it's a fish. And I'm going to clean it up a little bit. Take points away that I don't need. This I did need. And here I think I'm going to join these shape. Okay, close curve. There we go. And the nice thing is that I can, because everything is vectors, I can change the way each of these curves go at any time. So if there are ugly shapes, I can make them look prettier. Okay, let's have a small break of 10 minutes here, and so that you can try out a little bit of the of how to use the Bezier curves, how to use the pen tool. Also, my throat is kind of dry, so I want to drink a little bit. So we'll continue at 11. And share my screen. There we go. So now I drew a little bit more of the fish, and I'm trying out if it would look better to have another kind of stroke here, for another kind of outline for some parts of the fish, like here, these parts. I'm not quite happy with the stroke yet here. So I think I'll make it a little bit fatter still. But the stroke for the eye should definitely be also these ones, these fins, they need some fills. And what I wanted to show you with this was how to make different kinds of fills. So let's have a general fill for the fish body. So now there's no fill at all. So I have to check that the fill is here on the foreground. It is. So if I want to have like a very simple fill, something bluish maybe, well, that's simple enough. And I think I'll save it here as one of the palette colors as well. But right now I'd like to change the fill to a gradient. So this is one way of doing it from here. So now I could say that, okay, I want to have a normal gradient here, and I could have, oops, no, it went to the wrong place. Or I could have here take the fill tool and then click here that I want to have a linear fill. And now it's giving me these options of how to put this gradient. And this also works quite in the same manner than in Illustrator. So, okay, now I want to change the colors of this fill, linear fill. So I'll just click here and I can click either of these colors and change them. I think fish are, by the way, whiter from the down side than the upper side. So change that. And maybe this one could be a little bit more greenish. Yeah, I like this more. So other things that I could do here, other than change the way that this goes. By the way, I'll save this one here. Other ways I could do would be to change where the midpoint of the gradient goes from here, or I could put a third color into play by double clicking here. So now I could put something bluish in the middle if I wanted to, and I can always get rid of this if I'm not happy with it. Okay. And of course, linear gradients are not the only thing that's around here. In Illustrator, you can also find the radial gradient, just like here. And sometimes the radial gradients are good, sometimes they are not. Like, I don't think it's ideal here, where I want the fish stomach to be white, but not its tail. So what Illustrator doesn't have is this elliptical gradient, which I find quite interesting, that you have these 3 points where you can point your gradient to. And there's something called the conical, which is not good at all here for this one, but just that you know that it's there. Also, there's the bitmap, and I think I'll show that as well, but let's stick with the linear gradient for now. Okay. And I think I'll also save this gradient here for all cases. Okay, I could now, because it's also it's also showing the recent fills here. I could just click on these and click here. That's okay. I want to have the same fill for all of the parts. And the eye doesn't have any fill, but maybe this one. I think a radial gradient is pretty nice here. And obviously I'll have to adjust the gradient over here so that it matches a little bit better. Okay, and because the fish has other fins than these, I'll also duplicate these. I could copy paste them, these fins, but what I can also do is to, on my Mac, I can click Command and hold it, or on the Windows PC, I would hold Control, and then just click and drag the duplicate out of it. This is really, in Illustrator, I think it was Control click, or was it Alt click? I think it was Alt click. Anyway, what I need to do now is to place the fin behind the fish and also the fish body, and also change the way it looks. And I don't know why the fill went back to normal. I didn't consciously do that. Anyway, now here in the layers palette, because these are, well, vectors. Every curve is its own layer, so to say. We can create layers here for our curves and also add pixel layers, but they are mostly for organizational purposes. So now I'll put this curve here and change its fill. It's strange. It's claiming that it has the same fill, but it doesn't. Okay. For some reason, it's not showing the gradient fills at all. I don't know what I did wrong, but strange. Anyway, you can resize and rotate all of these shapes as much as you want. Okay, let's see if I do, instead of duplicating, I do Control Command C and Command V. And this will keep the fill. That was very strange. Anyway, I'll make this a little bit smaller so that there's a semblance of maybe perspective. And there we go. So what if I wanted to have another fill over this one? There are a couple of ways of doing it. So first of all, I would need to go to this appearance window, and there's also an appearance window in Adobe Illustrator, and it's very, very useful. So learn to use it as soon as you can, if you are using Illustrator, I mean. So here you can add strokes and fills to any object, or even groups. So I want to add another fill to the fish. So now I just click Add Fill. Now, for now, it's, well, no, it doesn't have anything, but I can take the fill tool and click here where it now says type none. You can click on bitmap. Let's see. Okay, there's a texture of granite. So I'll just open that up inside the fish. Okay, so now we have another fill here, and well, what if I want to show up the other fill over it? That's also possible. Here where it says normal, I can change it, the fill, to something else. And get some pretty interesting results. Okay, so here we go. So at this point, I'll save the document. It will save it in Affinity format. Save it as fish example. And you might have noticed that you could also have as many strokes as you like. So let's try that out with something else. Okay, I'll just get rid of, maybe not get rid of it, but I'll just make it invisible. I don't need this. So one day task that I thought for you for today would be like either making a fish or a flower with some fills and some outlines that you like, and exporting it as a JPEG or a PNG. The other day task would be to make a logo out of your own initials. And I did some sketching on a paper yesterday for my own initials. And I thought I'd do some sketching also right now. And then at the same time, I want to show you also what to do with this vector brush tool and how to do different kinds of strokes. So my initials are C and F. So there are a couple of ways I could do it, but first of all, I'll change this so that the color is a basic black and that there is no fill. Okay, and I think I'll put a little bit of a stabilizer here so that it will soften my stroke a little bit. Okay, somebody's sending me a lot of emails. I can hear it from the noises. Okay. So if I do it in the way I learned it in the school. Like really pretty. Or I could do it so that it has some filling already. Or just very simply. CDF, and that's it. Or maybe make it a little bit fancier shape. Like a moon, maybe. So this would be like a typical process for a logo, to first make a lot of sketches and then take the ones that you like the most and take them separately for then why should the F be that way around when it could be the other way around? Or it could be, so I could of course use the vector brush too. There's the brushes panel, by the way, just like we had in Affinity Photo, that I could here choose some fancier brush. For instance, this one. And put some pressure, because I'm using my Wacom tablet right now, so that the more I press, the bigger it will be. Okay. Okay, I see that the pressure now goes to mostly the color. So anyway, I can now change the way the outline looks for each and every one of these. So let's see which one I like to. Okay, let's try this one. And now the other artboard will come into good use. Because I can put the ones that I like over here and continue working with them in this artboard. I'll make it a little bigger. Anyway, So now I could go and change the way the stroke looks like here. I could change it into the texture line into a brush, and now it should be able to take any of these brushes. Okay, that's maybe too much. Let's see what these inks are like. Okay. And all of these are still vectors. So if I'm not happy with some of these curves, I can change them at any point. Like, yes, that's pretty obvious that they are curves. But you can also make pixel strokes in this software, like I said earlier. Or I can put any of these in another place. If I'm not happy with where this stroke is, I could change its place. And now, when I'm placing these, I'm trying to watch out for nice negative shapes. Negative shape is something that you might have come across earlier if you have had some visual design studies. So negative shape is basically the shape that is between the shapes. And contrary to its name, it's not a negative thing, but a positive thing to have good negative shapes. So there's something called an interesting negative shape. For instance, by changing this, I change the way the negative shape looks like over here. Like now, I think it's less interesting than it was before. You try to find contrasts between the shapes, that they are not too similar, and you try to see what the shape between the actual shape looks like. Like here, the negative shape would be this shape here. For instance, here it would be this kind of heart-like shape, or maybe it's a rabbit. But anyway, I like the way that this negative shape looks right now than it looked before. It has some nice things going on. I would maybe change the negative shape here a little bit, and maybe take away one of the, I think there's one too many points here. Just see if this looks, no, it doesn't look better. So I need to grab the anchor points and try to make it easier on the eye. And here's this anchor point, which is really small. Try to get that. Okay. Yes, now that's better. So basically, if I made, for instance, a rectangle over this, I could also look at these bigger negative shapes out here and see if they are okay or not. It would also work by giving it some fill. And yes, it's in the wrong place, so I place it here. I can also change the stacking order of the shapes by right-clicking and by going to alignment, no, arrange, yes. So there's move to front, move forward one, there's also move inside and move outside. Oh yeah, that was one thing I wanted to show you, by the way. Okay, here I can now check how it works with the negative shapes. Usually if you have something very, very long shapes going the same, approximately the same as the border, but not quite, then you might have some trouble there. So I'm now looking at this negative shape here, how it affects everything else. Then there's something called composition, and there's a little bit of a danger here with this logo, that the composition is too much here on the left, and that there's not, that it's kind of falling to the right. So I would probably have to change that as well. So make this into a group for now, this F shape. And see if I can do something about that falling. Might also work so that this goes out of the frame if I want to keep the frame at all. So you notice that at some points I don't speak anything. That's might be because there's a theory of the brain, you know, you have heard of the right brain and the left brain areas and different kinds of things that different brain areas do. And the language capacity is on most people on the left hemisphere of the brain. And then things that handle shapes and for instance, spatial orientation, they are on the right side of the brain. So also symbols and recognizing symbols, they are on the left side. So sometimes when you draw, for instance, then, or you do visual stuff, then your language ability simply stops for a while. because you can't, well, at least most people can't do those two things at the same time. At least that happens to me. So when I'm really drawing something, I'm able to listen to somebody speaking, and then, but I can't talk myself. I can't talk and draw at the same time. It's just not possible for me. And this left-right hemisphere thing is also one reason why people have sometimes trouble learning to draw, because learning to draw means that you have to look at things non-symbolically. You have to look at these shapes, for instance, not as letters, not as letters C and F, but just as abstract shapes. Or if you're drawing a person from what you can see, then you have to shut down that side of your brain that says that, okay, this is an eye, this is how an eye should look like when you draw it, and so on. That's something that little children learn when they are like six or younger, that, okay, this is, I'll just demonstrate here. Then this is how you draw a face. This is how an eye looks. Here's the nose. So these are actually symbols. They are not what a person really looks like. And also you might notice that the person has no brain. I mean that the eyes are not really in the top half of your head. If you look at any of the screens that are now shown, and you look if you measure how much space there is in the area between the eyes and the chin, and then you measure the area between the eyes and the top of the head, you will notice that it's roughly the same. It's something where our brain makes tricks with us, because we are very much eye and face oriented. So we tend not to notice the top area of our heads. So when you learn to draw something from a model, or draw realistically from your imagination, you have to throw these symbols out, at least for the while when you are drawing. Another thing is that you need to think in 3 dimensions. But anyway, there are books on this subject, by the way, if you're interested. Okay, so there were a couple of things that I still wanted to show here to you. Yes, so the day task would be for you similar to what I've done here, so that you first do several sketches. Some may be good, some may not be that good, and then choose maybe 2 or 3 of them, and then start working on them until they are so that you are happy with them. or that they could work as a logo. So think of a logo for a company, or maybe a clothing company or whatever company. So it's kind of not your initials, but your initials as a logo. So if you started a company that had your initials. There are other ways of making a logo, of course. Sometimes logos, they represent something, sometimes they don't. But the important thing is that you have to see it as a shape or as a collection of abstract shapes that should somehow go together in a visually interesting way or visually pleasing way. Let's say it like that. Okay. Yes, text. I wanted to show you how text works in Affinity Designer before I let you do anything else. Okay, so there are two text tools in Affinity Designer. There's the artistic text tool and the frame text tool. The artistic text tool is a little bit strangely named, but yeah, let's go with that now. So it works in a similar manner to Illustrator in many ways. So with the artistic text tool, you just click and then you can start writing. And usually this is all only in one long line. So let's change the font. As you can see, it gives me as a default font the Arial for some reason, don't know why. So I'll need to go away from the text tool into the move tool if I want to change the font from here. And I have the MacBook here, and yes, we do have the original Helvetica here. Also the Helvetica Neue, which is the newer version of Helvetica. I think in the YouTube you can still find the feature film about Helvetica. Like there's a 1.5 hour film about just the Helvetica font. And they've even made it interesting. So strange. Okay, I'll take Helvetica Bold. And a little bit bigger than that. Okay, maybe this is too big to handle. And I'll just get rid of this. Okay, what you can do here with this artistic text, you can do these things to it, but I would not recommend you to do this because some typographer somewhere has actually thought that about the how this font should look like, but of course as it's possible, then you can do it. So here Here we go. What I have put here, by the way, is not automatically shown by Affinity Designer. Here's the paragraph and also the symbols, transform, where's the text, character. So if you want to have these windows open, you'll have to find them here under text, show character, show paragraph, show typography, and then you have to put them here into this, what they call the studio. But most of these settings you can also find up here, just like in Illustrator. And yes, you can, any of the text, you can take any color or any gradient fill color, for instance, like here. And you can put in the appearance window several fills and strokes there. So you can combine the things that you already learned together with text to make it look quite nice. And yes, next week we will be talking a lot more about text. So I'm now just concentrating on a couple of things here. So when we get to layouts, by then you'll be already bored with all the typography. Then the other text tool is the frame text tool, where basically you first draw a frame and then you start writing there. Okay. So basically, if I change the frame, also the text will go with it. And that does not happen with the artistic text tool. So what if you want to put your text inside somewhere or on something? Well, that's also possible with the artistic text tool. So I'll go there. But first I need to create some sort of curve. So let's do it. Here we go. Okay, now I take the text tool and I just go on the curve, and so that my cursor changes. I hope you can see this. And then I click there once and I can start writing. There we go. And with the node tool, I can, of course, change the text, how it goes. And I can do the same with any sort of rectangle or closed shapes as well as these open shapes. And the text stays editable, which is also quite important. So I can do some really strange things with text with this tool happening. So if I double click in the text, it's editable, and by either Command A or Control A, I can change how it is here. Like maybe I want it to be, maybe I want to change the baseline so that it's higher or lower to the basic line. Also, I can click from these starting and end points where on the curve the text will start. Yeah, I think it's pretty neat. Okay, was there something else that I wanted to show you? There was, yes. How to put things inside each other. So where should I show that? Maybe here with these. Or maybe I'll just import an image, because that's something I haven't shown you yet. And then I will put that inside something else. Okay, I'll take this one. And now the cursor is asking me, where should I put the image? Okay, there we go. That's me when I'm 6 months old, by the way. That's my great aunt. She was great in many ways. So I'll make another artboard just for this. There we go. So now I want to put this inside a frame. And I'll create the frame with an ellipse. There. So we basically did this same thing in Affinity Photo on Monday. So there are a couple of ways of doing this. One way is just that I drag the image inside the ellipse like this. And now I can change where the image is, like so. And the ellipse itself will also control the image, like this. The other way is to make this into a mask. Let's see, I usually do this the wrong way around. Mask to below, yes. No, it was the right way around. So now this time the ellipse is behaving slightly differently. As you can see now, whenever I change the shape of the ellipse, it will show more or less of the image, but it doesn't control the image itself. And if I wanted to have the know, the border of the ellipse a little bit softer. I could put some effects there because the effects are here just so I could add some Gaussian blur there. Okay, now it blurs the whole image. I should just have the ellipse selected. Okay, now you can see that it blurs just the ellipse and not the image itself. Interesting thing, by the way, you can color images that you bring here by going into the color panel and then dragging this around. So the original image is not changing to anywhere, it's just that the image color goes from here. Yeah. Okay, so tell me, are there any questions so far? I guess you're all just eager to get to the day tasks. And I will go and, because I haven't written them here, so I will go now to the Moodle. And write those day tasks for you, so you know what to do. What? Turn editing on. So I have already put some images here, which are connected to the boring task I mentioned, but it's not quite as boring as okay. There's the follow. First of all, I change the size of the attachment so that the upload limit is 100 megabytes, but you won't need that big space anyway. Okay, day tasks. We have the 27th today. So 3 tasks. Traffic sign. Okay, so use the pen tool, mostly the pen tool, and also other tools that you need to make a vector version of the traffic sign. So there are two traffic signs there. Finnish older version traffic signs. There are more details in those, and that's why I chose the older ones. So I know that in Illustrator there's the automatic tracing function, so please don't use that. But because this is a task where you should try out making Bezier curves and straight lines. Okay, so the second one is more fun. And I already mentioned it, initials logo. Okay, that's the initials logo. And the third task to line out image. Sorry. A fish or a flower? Then export. There we go. Save and display. And now you should be able to see these tasks in your own Moodle page. So any questions? Okay, now I, by the way, stop the video. Ah, no, I didn't. Okay, I'll stop the recording. That's what I meant. Okay, let's stop sharing the screen and stop the recording.